Okay. So I'll just give you a little quick heads up how we're going to do the meeting here. I'm going to just spend about 5 minutes doing a little bit of introduction to Parsec and Parsec news. During that, I'll give a really brief introduction to you as our guest, but then, like I said, right after news, I'll give a little bit of a longer introduction and we'll get into the questions and stuff that we've talked about. So that's kind of how we're going to go.
Okay.
And I will just get started here. Okay, welcome to the February meeting of Parsec. Parsec is a 501c3 nonprofit organization promoting science fiction, fantasy, and horror in literature, media, and music for over 30 years. Our mission is to promote awareness of the richness of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music, further general education in the sciences and arts, support contributions, both scientific and artistic, to society, and to espouse the enjoyment of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music with others. Our program, February is Poetry Month. Members are encouraged to bring their own SF and fantasy poetry to share. And as our guest, we're going to have accomplished SF poet. We're going to welcome Bruce Boston. Bruce's fiction and poetry have appeared in hundreds of publications, especially Asimov's SF magazine, Amazing Stories, Analog, and more. Bruce will read for us Interstellar Tract and some other poems from his latest collection, Spacers. I missed something. Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets, which is a chapbook of SF poetry, which, by the way, we have a copy of, which we're going to give away to one of the people who have joined us today. Okay, I'm going to go over a few minutes of news. All the links mentioned in the following announcement will be copied into the chat on Zoom. Watch for them after we complete the announcements. Parsec meetings are always free to attend and open to the public. Support us by becoming a member. Dues are only $30 a year. Add $10 for each associate voting membership in the same household. And you can sign up at the link we'll post in the chat. Don't know if your membership is current? We have a view-only membership list, and we will post a link for that. At this point, we usually recommend the use of Amazon Smile as a way to support Parsec, but Amazon Smile, sadly, is ending as of February 23rd. Amazon is discontinuing Amazon Smile program after giving away $377 million. The program...
But not all to Parsec.
What was that?
But not all to Parsec.
Not all to Parsec, no. That's to do all their things. And the program directed 0.5% of sales on certain purchases to customers' preferred nonprofits, but Amazon said that they felt it wasn't making a huge difference, and there are many people who received their funds that disagree with that. Okay. Quickly, we'll go through the standing committees. Parsec Inc. This year, the theme was 7-day weekend. That's still open for submissions until February 28th. Is John from Parsec Inc. here, or?
I don't see John here.
No, we don't see John today. If you're going to submit because it's going to close on February 28th unless they extend that.
Greg Klumpner, I would point out, is the editor for the Parsec Inc. anthology Triangulation 7-day weekend this year. Last I heard, he and John had talked about how well how good the response had been this year, that they had gotten appreciably more stories this year for the 7-day weekend than they did last year. And they are looking forward to they have gotten some good stories, and they've gotten, as Greg put it in the last email, the cream will rise. So, and that was something that was in the Parsec newsletter, the Sigma. So, but they are looking forward to making choices and making progress and putting out another very well appreciated, well received, critically acclaimed anthology.
Thank you, Kevin. And since you have our attention, do you have anything to say about the conference this year? Confluence Conference, which is going to be July 1st, 22nd, and 23rd.
Well, we are definitely having one. There was some stuff in the newsletter about that. The guest of honor is Ada Palmer, and the featured music guest. You want to do this? She's feeding me lines. I say too much. The featured music guest is Sassafras. We have Saturday entertainment in the form of the Confused Greenies. We're looking forward to that. They do a little bit of improv and a little bit of I don't know what to call it. Commedia dell'arte. Yes, I know. That's my theater history coming back. But we're looking forward to that. We've had a couple of meetings with them, and they're really fun people. I look forward to it. They're looking forward to working with us too. Let's see what else we have.
Entertainment is free with paid membership.
And the Saturday evening entertainment is free with a paid membership to Confluence. We also have the writing workshop. Two of them, one on Friday, or not Friday, one on Saturday morning, one on Sunday morning. And the inimitable Timmons essayist is going to be conducting the writing workshops. We have a guest speaker for the Saturday workshop in the form of Greg Frost.
Not on the website yet.
Which is not on the website yet. We're still, I shouldn't say we, but Karen is still putting that together. I can't take any credit on that. Let's see. The workshops open March 15th. Again, free with paid membership. Anything else, dear?
Our featured artist is Susan Dexter.
Our featured artist is Susan Dexter. She will be designing the t-shirts, the program book cover, and badge art. She will also have some wonderful art and demonstrations and stuff like that in the art show. Workshop. I did say workshops. Demos, sorry. Workshops and demos, whatever. Maybe both. Anything else? I think that's enough to.
Well, thank you.
For Confluence.
Thank you for bringing us up to speed on Confluence. That's our news for today. Let's get into our program. So welcome, Bruce. You're the first Grand Master of Science Fiction Poetry, as granted by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association in 1999. In addition to having your poems appear in multiple Asimov's, Amazing Stories, Analog, Weird Tales, Strange Horizons, Daily Science Fiction, Realms of Fantasy, Dreamforge, and many more, you've published something like 40 poetry collections of one sort or another, including Sensuous Debris, selected poems from 1970 to 1995, Brief Encounters with My Third Eye, selected short poems 1975 to 2016, and Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets, which is just from last year. That's by Mind's Eye Publication. It came out in 2022. We have a copy here, which we're going to give away to one of our attendees today. And to start, I'd like to explore the relationship between poetry and science fiction. And while science on the face of it is about dispassionate theorizing and the mastery of natural laws, science fiction is most often about imagining the future of or the consequences of our dealing with science. So when we've published your stories like Interstellar Tract and The Ice Miner, they speak to me about the common humanity of communities moving beyond Earth, as opposed to a special technical or heroic class that gets to adventure in space. And in your newest collection, the poem Song of the Eternal Sailors harkens all the way back to Odysseus and brings in Ahab and Captain Nemo and links them all in what seems to me to be a human impulse that to move out to the stars and beyond. So I wanted to see how you feel about that in your poetry and how you see humanity as still having that drive for adventure to take us beyond Earth. So let's start there, Bruce.
I don't think it's so much a drive for adventure. It's more curiosity, like what's over the next hill. But it also includes avarice.
Okay.
This search for fame and fortune. And I think what you're talking about when you say adventure is that what John Wyndham called the outward urge, why humans have spread throughout the globe in all habitable areas. Now, is that still an urge for us? I think it's very much an urge, and what speaks to that is what we have done with space so far, going to the moon, sending unmanned vehicles to Mars, and sending probes to other planets. But we're up against a barrier here because it's pretty clear from what we know of science today, which we didn't always know, is that space is not a place for the human body. In other words, we didn't evolve to exist in no gravity situations and be exposed directly to cosmic rays. So I think this urge has taken other directions today in this outward urge, because it's sort of always seeking, in terms of curiosity, it's always seeking something new, like advancements in science or exploring the oceans. As far as exploring space, not only the probes and stuff we've sent off, but the very existence of science fiction as an important medium shows that the urge is still there. But how we're going to fulfill that, I don't think we're going to see it in our lifetimes.
Well, I think one of the things that you said just now that fascinated me was you really see the complexity of that urge. It's curiosity, but you also mentioned avarice. There could be a number of different human impulses that combine into that, and I think that's an interesting concept.
Well, then what?
You got it? Was that another question?
I was just making a comment that you seem to bring a number of human impulses into that idea. There's curiosity, but you also mentioned avarice and maybe the desire to conquest or personal pride or personal accomplishment. So I thought that was interesting on the number of human impulses that might be included in that urge to expand outward.
I'd agree with that.
One of the things that I found fascinating in looking at Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets was just the idea of what it takes to put such a collection like that together. Because as a relatively new editor, I'm interested in how you balance out a collection, like thematically and lengthwise. And we're always thinking when we put the magazine together about how we have a little bit of light reading and some heavier pieces, and how we balance length and theme. So what was it like to put Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets together, and what were you thinking about as you did that?
Well, that Spacers was fairly easy to the theme collection. So it's just sort of all the poems relate in one way or another. In most poetry collections I've put together, I try to put the strongest. I usually start with a short poem and end with a longer one. And I try to put poems that have resonance with one another next to each other. And I think the strongest poems in books, I don't know if you do this with the magazine, is I try to put one of the strongest poems first and one of the strongest poems last. And I did that to some extent with Spacers.
That's the exact same concept that I was taught when you're building an art portfolio. I was, in art school back in the day before computers and digital portfolios and things like that. And exactly what you said is how you were taught to build a portfolio, is the strongest first and last, and then kind of some connection from one to the next in between.
And I'd be curious on that particular collection, like Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets. That's like one of the first poem there. Why did that one become kind of the front piece, or the thing that sort of starts the message of that collection? What made you choose that one?
Well, as you notice, the title of the book is Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets, and the title of that poem is For Spacers Snarled in the Hair of Comets.
Oh, okay.
And when Jeffrey Ford gave me a blurb for the book, he described it as a mosaic of cosmic adventure. And that's sort of what the book's trying to do. And it deals with, like most science fiction, it takes place far in the future. And when we reach the stars, live on other planets. And most of the poems in the collection talk about characters in that situation, both good and bad. So the Four Spacers, Snarling Hair comments, the first poem, it's sort of a dedication to the characters in the other poems. That's one of the reasons I put it first. The other reason probably is it won an award.
Well, I agree. I get that. Now that you've said that, I can see that, having read through the book. That one seemed to me like, and I'm not the best interpreter of poetic art, but that one's almost seemed to me the idea of two people, or the author and the reader sharing a moment. And it seemed to me to have a message like, we get it. We've been through all this. We know how difficult, and we know we've experienced the darkness and we've survived it. And, we understand that, and we can kind of see beyond that. And that's what it said to me anyway. I don't know if that was your intent or
that was my intent, and also human companionship. Because
Nice.
it's two characters meeting. And it also makes a reference to drugs with the hallucinogenic ale. And there's quite a few references to drugs throughout the book. And spacers can mean more things than people that are living in space.
That is true. Well, why don't you expand, since I wasn't thinking that, why don't you expand on that just a little bit? Why did those references make their way in? What were you trying to convey with that concept of the hallucinogenic experiences?
I just think that making the poem speak on more than one level. I think the best poetry has substance to it beyond the words. And I think I was striving for that.
Good. One of the ones the poetry book has a fair amount of kind of darkness to it, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that and your dystopian work. Like, I have not read it, but what I've read about The Gardener's Tale is it's described as a dystopian novel in the flavor of Orwell and Huxley, a gripping dystopia extrapolated from our own present. So my question was, what's the relationship between dystopia and your poetry? And for instance, in Spacers, you speak of darkness, but it sounds to me more like a place where humans are adept, or even a place where they long for at times, that darkness is a kind of place we belong, or that we deal in every day. And how do you relate between, your dystopian novel, your poetry, and your own feelings about darkness and dystopia?
Well, I've written a fair amount of political poems, including some about dystopias. Dystopian Dusk is one I'd recommend. I don't have it handy right now. In terms of, let's see, rephrase it. Give me the question.
Okay. All right. Well, one thing that I feel like I picked up on from Spacers is that there's definitely it's definitely about humans dealing with darkness, but it almost felt to me like you were saying humans are pretty adept at that, because I didn't get, in a lot of dystopia, I get the feeling it's like, oh my God, everything's falling apart, it's really dark, and we're all going to die, but from your poetry, I got the sense of this is kind of the realm humans work and live in. Yes, there's darkness. Yes, there's dystopia.
About overcoming it too. It's about facing it and overcoming it.
There you go. That's kind of what I was trying to understand there.
One of the poems I'm going to read, I'll mention it then, also illustrates that.
Do you still, just I guess even personally, think that that's something that we'll always have with us, or do you see us possibly tripping over the edge and as a species, causing great catastrophe for ourselves, or do you think we'll always pull it in at the right time?
Pull what in at the right time?
The ability to survive, and
I'm not a prophet, so I don't think I can answer that. Right now, the Earth doesn't look too good. It seems like we have to concentrate a lot more on taking care of it.
That's a perfectly reasonable answer. Still on this idea, like just talking about that idea of looking after the earth. One poem in that collection, Dark Rains Here and There, seemed to be about climate change, but perhaps also some aspect of humanity taking its uncontrolled assault on natural environments with it to the stars. It almost seemed like it was talking about, and here we are on this other planet, sending it out of control with the things that we do. So what were you going for with Dark Rains Here and There? What were you trying to say?
Dark Rains Here and There, each stanza portrays a time in the main character's life, a woman's life. And it takes you through these various, this is one of the poems I'll read, and you'll see that when I read it. It's like we need challenges. And the darkness is a kind of challenge. We need to have something that challenges us.
I absolutely love that. Darkness is a challenge. I'm writing that down. I need to work on that. That's cool. Okay, so also I wanted to point out to people that you have fun in that collection too. There's one, The Poetry of Science Fiction, which is composed entirely of titles of science fiction books and periodicals. And that seemed to me to be something that would be very hard to do, and you wouldn't be able to sit down and write it. It would almost be something you'd have to write over a long period of time. So what was the inspiration for your science fiction title poem, and was it a quick thing, or was it a slow and deliberative process over a long time? How did that work?
It wasn't a long time, but it was a deliberate process. Other people have done, this isn't the first poem written using that kind of approach, and it's a little bit akin to found poetry. It occurred to me that there was a lot of poetry in the titles of science fiction books. And I was wondering if I could string all those together. And a lot of them I drew out of Neil Barron's Anatomy of Wonder, which is a critical study of SF. Came out a number of years ago. But in the index of that book, it lists every title mentioned in this rather lengthy analysis. And so I drew titles from that seemed like they might fit into something that made sense. And then I took some from my own library in memory. And so it wasn't a terribly long process, over a period of 3 or 4 days. And I just tried to string them together in a way that made sense and also communicated something about science fiction. And every word in the poem is from a science fiction title. And there's no incomplete titles listed, and there's no other words. Yeah. But you'll see when I read it.
Well, I think that's really, really fascinating, because I looked at it and I thought, well, this would be a really fun thing to do. But I missed the idea that, like, part of the inspiration was that there is poetry in the titles that are used in science fiction stories, and
well, I think there's a lot of poetry in science fiction. Certain writers, Alfred Bester, Jack Vance.
Would you include Ray Bradbury?
Oh, sure, Bradbury. Yeah, I think Bradbury also has a Grandmaster from the SFPA Grandmaster Award. And I think it was given more in the strength of his prose than on his poetry.
Yeah, very good.
Because many of his stories are very poetic.
Yeah, that's what always struck me about reading Ray Bradbury. Just the language itself, as opposed to even the ideas. Okay. Yeah. From the group, do we have any questions at this point, or would we like Bruce to read some of his work? Anyone have any questions?
Any questions?
Okay. Then Bruce, would you be kind enough to read us some poetry?
Okay. Okay, here's the one which was mentioned recently. Dark Rains Here and There. 1. When she was a girl in Myanmar, dark rains fell suddenly in great sheets of water and sound in the heated afternoons. Thunder would rattle the tin roof and the kitchen would often flood. When the dark rains fell on Myanmar, she lived in poverty beneath the tyranny of a state beyond redemption. When the dark rains fell on Myanmar, the sky gave up its color. Shadows would disappear and there would be one great shadow covering everything. 2. When she was a woman in San Francisco, the dark rains would fall slowly and steadily for days at a time, turning the pastel houses gray beneath an even grayer sky. When the dark rains fell on San Francisco, the tires of passing cars hissed endlessly on the wet pavements. When the dark rains fell on San Francisco, she lived with passion and belief and drug-fueled flights the world's unfathomed. 3. When she was a wanderer in space, the dark rains fell many ways on many different worlds. When the dark rains fell in the labyrinth of canyons that lace the southern hemisphere, the Epsilon Eridani 9, they danced this way and that in constantly shifting whirlpools of wind. When the dark rains fell in the light gravity, the Fomalhaut's only habitable moon, it was in large limpid droplets, clinging to the cilia and limbs of overarching trees. When the dark rains fell in many different worlds, here and there, she learned to live with love bright as a rocket's flare and loss deep as a singularity. 4. When she was a senora in the high Mexico desert, in the steady days of her peace and resolution, she would stand at the screen door just before dusk. She would listen to the insects ticking against the dusty metal crosshatch and watch the light from a low sun encroaching on the shade of the porch. When the sky remained cloudless on the high desert, when life seemed dry and spare as the land around her, she found herself watching for one more dark rain she could walk in.
Yeah, that just has so much emotion locked in it, and at the end you really have that sense of kind of longing for a little bit of the challenge of the darkness that you were talking about earlier.
That was the goal. Say what else we got here?
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that poem?
Dark rains. Somebody should have thought of that.
Okay.
Somebody should have had assignment.
What? I couldn't hear that.
I'm not sure where that was coming from. Somebody has their mic on and we're getting a little extraneous noise. So unless you're asking a question, if you're asking a question, try to be very clear. And otherwise, let's turn your sound off.
I muted people.
Okay.
If you have a question, you could put your hand up and then I should be able to see that.
Okay. Well, Bruce, why don't you move on to your next poem? Except
I might have okay. I might have muted him.
you muted everybody.
Well, yeah, because his name isn't Bruce on here.
It's Marge.
Okay, I asked to unmute Bruce.
Yeah, sorry, Bruce.
So the one that's Bruce, I did mute then. Okay.
Yeah, we muted the computer you were at, Bruce. It's
there you go. Sorry about that. There was one named Bruce, and then there was one named Marge, and I got the wrong one.
Okay. We all set now?
We're good.
You're good. You can move on to your next poem.
Okay. This one is called Song of the Eternal Sailors, and it actually, Ron, you mentioned this also. And it's actually a rhyming poem, which I don't do. Mostly I do free verse. From Liverpool to Shanghai, the waterways we roam. The wave roar and the salt spray, our only home. Across the dark Sargasso and to the chilling winds, the wages of the past that covered all our sins. And this is a song. It has a chorus. And it occurs after every stanza, except the last one, which is a different chorus. And so I'll do the chorus now, and I'm not going to do it 4 or 5 times, but after every stanza, it occurs again. Ah, the sea so bright and eager, oh, the ocean dark and wide. Let the waters answer for us all. Odysseus was the captain when we rowed across the waves. We left the Cyclops blinded in the hollow of his caves. We saw the singing sirens. We could not hear their call, their beauty like a burning brand upon us one and all. Chorus. We sailed to the ocean's edge before the earth was round. The flapping of the sails made such a mournful sound, like men without a country, but for the country blue. The maps are ever changing. The shoals are always new. We rode with Peg-leg Ahab and how the man did rave, his wooden limb is floating in the waters of his grave. We scanned that thin horizon for a plume against the sky, and when we ran the longboats, we let the steel fly. With Nemo on the Nautilus, we moved beneath the seas, alive under a rippling sky with seaweed for our trees. At 40 fathoms down below, the silence reigned supreme. The streets we left behind exist as no more than a dream. Now we fled the mother world and sailed into space as misfits, outcasts, pioneers of the human race. Across the Magellanic clouds, propelled by solar winds, the wages of the past have covered all our sins. New chorus. Ah, the stars so bright and eager. Oh, the light years dark and wide. Let the vacuum answer for us all.
Well, when I read that, the first thing that came to my mind, because I'm a big fan of Tennyson and Ulysses, and in that poem, he's, obviously talking about Ulysses, an older man who basically is, in the end saying, even though we're old now and we're not that which we once were, we're still going to go out and challenge, the sounding deeps. And in your poem, instead of an individual speaker like Ulysses, it sounds like that's humanity, saying the same things you've been talking about here today, which is that urge to go out and explore and face things. So I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you. Okay, this next one is in response to the barriers we're going to face in traveling to the stars. And it was inspired by a poem by William Carlos Williams called Trapped. And in that poem, he instructs the people of a small town how to perform a funeral. And critics of that poem that analyze it claim what he was really writing about was how you write a poem. And the sense of his poem is to keep it simple, keep it clean. And since I'm a science fiction writer, when I took off from this, I decided to write a poem about a similar prophetic voice talking to the people of Earth about how to perform a star flight. And it's called Interstellar Tract. I will teach you, my people, Earth people. I will teach you, my Earth people, how to perform a star flight. For you have it over a troop of astronauts. You have the space sense necessary. See, imagination leads. I begin with a design for a ship. For soul's sake, not streamlined, not silver either, not polished. Let it be weathered and familiar, as full of natural color as the world it leaves behind. Let us have grass on all sides, yes, windows, my Earth people. Let us have glass on all sides, yes, windows, my Earth people. To what purpose? So we might see the stars streak in the wake of our lightspeed passage. So we might watch our past shrink and our future swell before us. No plastics, please. And if there must be steel, for Clark's sake, keep it covered. Fill the corridors with earth, which gives beneath our feet, where grass can begin to grow. Plaster the walls and panels with murals of your own making, or common mementos from the past. A favorite poem, a photograph, an old poster, a dried flower. You know the things I mean, my Earth people. Better still, no corridors at all. No cramped cabins to hold us in. Rather a vast and open space, spun for gravity, where our thoughts may freely flow. With a river known for its warmth, a forest or two, so we could build homes of our own choice. A rough and natural ship then, a miniature Earth so clean, green and blue and full of clouds, if you can imagine such a thing. And for light, no glowing tubes that turn the skin a sickly hue, but the passing stars themselves magnified by sufficient art and craft to rival the lumens of our sun. As for the bridge and crew, bring them down, bring them down. A navigator, perhaps, to plot our course between systems, but no communications officer to turn our varied voices into one. No strutting Captain King leading us through the cosmos, calling our ship his ship. Let the controls remain simple. For what reason? So any man or woman can learn to master them. So every one of us might take a turn at the board and have a hand in making our destinations. And finally, each sidereal cycle, let us sit openly with one another, side by side beneath the trees, my earth people, as we conspire to save the best in our origins and leave the worst behind. You have nothing to lose. Believe me, the stars will fill your pockets. Go ahead now. I think you are ready for flight.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, you're right on the idea of the original tract by Carlos Williams being about keeping things simple, but it also seemed to speak to me about the idea of taking things back from the elite or the privilege to experience something or provide something, and that we all can participate in something. So in your poem, Interstellar Tract, I see that as kind of a hopeful song to the idea that humanity, the average people, will eventually be able to travel in space and to experience things beyond Earth.
Yeah, in this case, by taking Earth with us.
Oh, okay.
It's just a beautiful poem. The images on it are just wonderful.
Thank you. One
So
more.
I guess, well, one more, but I just have a personal question. How do you see things, evolving with actual space travel? Like, we've gone from governments being able to go into space to billionaires being able to go into space to, I think we're moving down the line to where we're going to get to just space tourism in a few decades. What do you think?
Well, I think that's possible depends on what you mean by tourism. If you mean actually seeing the moon up close, maybe seeing some of the planets closer, I think that could happen in a couple generations, a couple decades.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's hear your next poem. If you have one more.
Yeah, I have a couple more if you want.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we would let you keep reading all day.
Okay. I got enough poems to do that. Probably a couple thousand. I don't think all of them are worth reading at this point. Okay, this one is the poetry of science fiction I put together from the titles of science fiction books and periodicals. See if you recognize some of the titles. Against the fall of night, across the wounded galaxies, on by the new worlds, behold the man, he, she, and it, born into light, dying of the light, becoming alien between worlds, a new species more than human, always coming home alone against tomorrow. Time and again, those who can change the sky and all between. We cast down the stars, 400 billion stars on wings of song. Brightness fills the air, downward to the earth, down the bright way, burning with a vision. Earth abides, a swiftly tilting planet in the ocean of night. Explorers of the infinite, exiled from Earth, dancing at the edge of the world, we call back yesterday. Excuse me. Dancing at the edge of the world. We call back yesterday in memory yet green. We return to Earth, but we are not of the Earth. The future took us out here, across the sea of suns, in search of forever, beyond the blue event horizon, where time winds blow. Lest darkness fall, you shall know them. Strange relations, Strange ports of call, strange horizons from utopia to nightmare, starline velocities 10,000 light years from home, men like gods, women of wonder, holding your right hands, the shape of things to come. The stars are ours, take back plenty, dream the creation of tomorrow, dream the last dangerous visions.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it reads so well, and I loved hearing you read it, but like when I'm reading it, I'm trying to pick out the titles. When you're reading them, they just flow. It says something. That's really great.
So did you notice, did you pick out some of the titles?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I especially like some of the ones that are from my childhood, like Earth Abides and Against the Fall of Night, and then, you know, getting into Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions. And
The stars are ours, is that Andre Norton? I can't remember. Okay, what else have we got here?
Of all the poems you've done, do you have a particular favorite or a couple particular favorites?
Uh, I've got about 60 favorites in here.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think, excuse me. I don't think there's one favorite in all of that. It'd be hard to choose. But if I had to, I'd probably go with a long poem. She was there for him the last time. I guess I'd go with, for my favorite, if I forced to pick one. That you'll find in Dark Roads, which is the volume that's contains the best of what I consider
Okay.
my long poem.
And what's the title on that one? Dark Roads?
Dark Roads. That covers about 50 years.
yeah,
Okay. I'll make note of that.
yeah, which means we'll buy it.
I hope. Okay, here's the first poem that you asked about, which I said was a dedication to the other characters in the book. Her spacer smiled in a hair of comments. If you've heard the stellar Vox Humana, the untuned ear takes for static. If you kiss the burning eyelids of God and seized upon the moon's reflection, disjointed and backwards in the choppy ink of some alien sea, then you know how sleek and fleshy, how treacherous the stars can become. While the universe falls with no boundary, you and I sit in a cafe of a port city on a planet whose name we've forgotten. The vacuum is behind us and before us. The spiced ale is cool and hallucinogenic. Already the candle sparkles in our plates.
Yeah. Love it.
Thank you.
I didn't read it as, and I guess because I looked at it first, I didn't really realize that was like a comment on what's coming in the rest of the book, and that it's talking to and for the other characters. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, maybe I should have singled that out some way.
Do we have any comments? Do we have any comments or questions from attendees from the group?
Everybody's quiet today.
Yeah, it's a very quiet day.
I think that covers all of the poems that you mentioned.
Kevin, do you have something to say?
Well, the thing that I have to say is a statement of sadness, because the quality of the sound, at least through the phone, I can barely hear what Bruce is reading. And so while I'm glad you guys are loving these poems, I don't hear them clearly enough.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Have an
Deb.
opinion, and it makes me very sad. I guess
Oh,
I'm just
you'll-
gonna have to get it
you're
and
next-
read 'em, huh?
You'll have to get his books and read them, and then you'll have to watch the video when we get the video out there.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
sound, it must be on your end with the phone because the sound quality here is all right.
Good, okay. I look forward to seeing the video then.
Very good. Okay, let me read I think I covered all the poems you mentioned, but let me read the last poem in the collection.
Okay.
Now this one I couldn't get into Asimov's because they don't like, it has irregular left margins and they frown upon that, regardless of the poem. I think it was published in maybe in Amazing. Spacer's Compass. South I shipped, galactic south, spanning the reaches of unbounded space, through the moss stars and beyond, hanging with this crew or that. A rough lot they were, some just strange, stranger than you'd care to know for a light year or two on the fly. West I wandered, galactic west, leaving lovers, changing friends, past clusters hanging in the heavens like burning ingots and bands of flame. Landing always in a different land, a ready cup for alien ways, seeking never so much an answer as a fix, a frame of reference to sift my strangeness from. East I flew, galactic east, against the words of wiser souls, to decaying grandeur steeped in fog and cultures deadly spent, to language worlds and pleasure worlds, and the mother world or fabled so, a desolation of rust and snow, heir only to its past. Old I grow, galactic old, the polar night now calls my name, and still I tramp the stellar routes, from burning white to burning red, jump cutting lives and lands, fixing no frame of reference beyond the passage itself, adrift in the passages yet to be taken. Space has no directions, and holds all directions at once, a well of radiant possibilities, all matter of strangeness, and the stars are for the living.
Oh, nice. Nice. Okay. Thank you very much, Bruce. Jane, do you want to pick one of the attendees today to give Bruce's book away to?
I rolled a random dice set, rollerDie.net, and Joseph Newcomer will be the yeah. So you'll receive that.
All right.
So we'll make sure Scott will have to get your address. We'll get that
Give
sent
it
out
an
to you.
honest
Yeah, Joe,
review.
just send me an email and give me your mailing address and I'll get that out to you. So Bruce, I really want to thank you for stopping by and being with us today and sharing your poetry with us. It's meant a lot to me, and I think it's meant a lot to the group. And the video will be available for the other members of our group who couldn't make it today. And I look forward to getting more of your poetry submissions for Dreamforge. So I hope to, be publishing you some more in the years ahead. And
Too.
And I would just like to point out that I am in the same publication with Bruce Boston as a poet about, 10 or 15 years ago. Somebody had put out a call for limericks for a chapbook that they put together. And you had a couple of limericks in there. I had a couple of limericks in there. So, I don't think that quite puts me on the same level, but, I have dreams.
Depends on how good the limericks are.
What's that?
I said it depends on how good the limericks are.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, they were good enough to get
Oh.
published.
yes,
I've
limericks
got one
are
here.
Kevin's strength.
A limerick?
Okay.
Here you go. A wyvern, a worm, and two dragons in a monster bar raising their flagons remembered the tale of a comrade from Dale who was done in by a hobbit named Baggins. I know, not specifically true, but the communication between dragons is kind of shaky anyway, so.
You got me looking over my shoulder.
Okay. All right. Well, again, if anyone has any questions for Bruce, now's the time to ask.
Yeah, I
Wow.
actually had a question about, I notice a lot of your poems are very like narrative, right? And I wonder if that's something that's just like, you think about the story. Does the story come first? Does the language come first? But I noticed that they often end up with a plot, with something happening, and going places. And I just would be curious to hear about that process for you.
I think the idea for the poem comes first if it's a narrative poem, for me. But I don't see the divisions that are commonly viewed like poetry fiction generally, or poetry short story, or flash fiction. It seems like writing creatively is a continuum. And poems can be stories, novels can be rich in poetry, etc. But with regard to your question, yeah, the story comes, if it's a narrative poem, the story generally comes first. But I wrote a lot of poems that are not narrative. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
anyone else?
I have a question. You've been writing poetry for a long, long, long time.
60
What
years.
What's that?
60 years.
60 years. Finally, you're starting to get the hang of it, right?
Yeah.
What was it in that you're sitting down, taking pen in hand and putting words on pages that made you decide to write the poetry? Where did the poetry come from initially? If that makes sense. Where did the words that you put down, you said, oh my gosh, that's a poem. That's not a story. That's not, it's just, this is stuff. And what you worked on and what you tried to make better. How did that develop and come about?
Well, I didn't start out planning to be a poet. I planned to be a fiction writer. And the first books I published were collections of short stories. And my first novel, which took me 20 years to get published, is a narrative, and it's a mainstream narrative about the 60s and drug culture of the 60s. So, what was the question? Yeah.
Oh, you're muted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically,
I
where
went
did the
with
poetry come from
Where did the poetry
as you're
come
writing,
from? Okay,
as your work as a
I've
writer
always
develops?
loved language, and as a kid, I read a lot of science fiction from the time I was about 10 to an adult, and I still kept reading it. It's all through the 80s, up through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I also picked up on a lot of poets whose work I enjoyed in college. Now, one of the reasons I went with SF poetry is that writing long fiction is very time consuming unless you write very fast. And I had to make a living somehow while I was doing all this. And so poetry seemed to fit that well. And also another thing, and like all people, I got more strokes for the poetry I was doing. People really liked a lot of the poetry. I think everybody goes in a direction where they're getting more strokes.
Yep. And before,
What did you do for a living that allowed you the time to write?
A lot of different things. I did a lot of manual labor when I was young. I also was a computer programmer right out of college. I did that for a couple of years. And I eventually I had my own moving and hauling business for several years, 10 years. And I eventually settled into book design. I've designed a lot of my own books. So that sort of sums it up.
Nice. That's varied too, to go from programming to book design is, that's a lot of different thought processes and skills that go into those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I also design books for other people and even put them together for other people in terms of what was in them and the order in which the things appeared. Nothing lately, but a lot. I did a lot of that in the 80s and 90s.
That's cool.
I just realized I have beside me a copy of one of our issues, issue 10, that you can see Bruce's name right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the first time I ever got top billing for a poem.
And you can see we used that. It's Ice Miners. It was originally in Amazing Stories, September 1988. And I still think it speaks to, where we're going today, and both technology and the idea of human communities and moving beyond Earth. So. Okay. All right. Well, Bruce, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's have a little bit of a hand here for Bruce.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And you're welcome. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Or you're welcome to just click leave and sign off. We're going to be here talking about a few things and maybe reading some of our poems. I don't know if anybody brought any, but
one question: who's the guest next month?
Who's the guest next month? Next month, I don't think we're having a guest. I think actually that's one of the things we're going to talk about. Yeah, it's just going to be a meeting. Kevin, we're going to be talking about Confluence. I think the March meeting, if I remember correctly, is about Confluence, and how it's going to be organized and what people's ideas are for the conference.
What we do, we try to survey the people who attend the meeting, and hopefully we can at the meeting to propose panel topics for the writers and editors and publishers and all of the people who are going to be guests at Confluence. And hopefully we will have a list of guests that we can, at least initially. The invitations went out about a week ago, I think, at least the first wave. And I don't know how many people have responded. So far, I know that I'm pretty sure that Scott and Jane Knoll will be guests. I'm pretty sure that Tim and DeSayas and Greg Frost will be guests. I'm pretty sure about Ada Palmer. And more than that, I can't swear to.
Although I will say in April, I was talking about this before we started the meeting in social, but in April, our meeting is on April 15th, and I've managed to get Dr. Robert Harpold, who's a member of the Trajectory research and team for Artemis 1. So he's part of the team that makes lunar trajectories and that sort of thing that were used in Artemis. And he was in mission control. He's one of the no-go team guys who was working on the Artemis as it went around the moon and deciding how to get it back home. So he's going to come and talk about all that kind of stuff. And cool. Dealing with NASA was a little bit of an interesting thing. Well, first of all, where that came from was he wrote a story for Dreamforge in issue 4. And at that time, we didn't really know anything about him. But as I got to learn a little bit more about him and realize he was a scientist and that he was working, with NASA, I said, you'd be a good science explainer. You'd be a good science presenter. And I talked about, well, if you ever decide you want to write an article for us, go ahead and do that. And so this year he came back to us and he said, well, I would never really thought of it, but you planted a bug in my head and it's been there since you said that. So I'd like to write an article about Artemis 1 for Dreamforge. And when he said that, I said, well, then I'd like you to also learn how to be a speaker. So why don't you start by coming to Parsec and talking to our group? And it was very interesting because apparently if you're a part of the NASA team and you want to write something for somebody, that has to go through levels of review and approval. So it took months for him to get that past his bosses that his article could be published. And then when I said, well, I just want you to be a speaker at Parsec, and I explained it's just a little Pittsburgh science fiction fantasy group, not anything really big, but still NASA assigned him essentially a handler, a public affairs person who has to walk him through this process, and I think be here to make sure, I don't know, that he doesn't give off any secrets or something. I don't know, but so it's quite a process to get him to publish a little article with us and to talk with us. but I think that'll be fun, and I hope it's a start of something additional in his career path, because he's a really young guy, and hopefully that will be something that he does in his future, and we get him to do more of.
Have you ever met Jeffrey Landis as a guest?
We have not yet, but we should. He comes to Confluence every year, and Mary, and they're absolutely great to listen to. So
Yeah, he does some amazing presentations.
I would point out that I got an email, and Karen and I both got emails, and Scott, I don't know if you did or not, from Mary Terzillo, asking if this was going to be something that was recorded, that they would be able to listen to and appreciate, as they're both doing a fencing tournament for the weekend. So they would have been here themselves, but they are otherwise engaged right now. But they're looking forward to being able to listen to the meeting and listen to your talk and your poetry.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I saw he was
They're
one of
both
the
good friends.
blurbs on the back of the book. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to sign off. Thanks again.
all right, thank you, Bruce.
One
Thank you
thing
for
I
coming.
didn't get in that I wanted to say is I love the visuals in Dreamforge. It's one of the best,
Okay,
one
well
of
you're
the beautiful science fiction magazines I've ever seen.
Thank you
complimenting
very
Jane.
much. Yeah, thank you very much. I did the illustrations for both the Interstellar Tract and for the Ice Miners, and
Wow.
when I did Miners, then Scott's like, "That's got to be the cover." So that's yeah.
They were great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, bye, Bruce.
Bye.
Okay, we'll do some member announcements. I'll start. I was interviewed by John Goodwin, president of Galaxy Press, for Writers of the Future podcast number 210. So if anybody's interested in seeing how that interview went, we'll put a link in the chat for you.
It is in the chat.
It is in the chat. And
I also put the links in the chat for connections for Bruce as well.
there you go. That's my announcement. Anybody else got any announcements? It's a quiet Saturday.
It certainly is.
I have a reading that I'm doing in March, which is the launch of the Reckoning issue, Our Beautiful Reward, which is their special issue on autonomy. So that I can drop. They're going to have a number of different authors from the issue reading, and they're doing it with Essential Dreams Press and Storied Imaginarium. So I'll throw in the link if anyone wants to come to the reading.
Yep, put that in the chat.
Yeah, and also we'll take a look at that and help promote that on our social at Dreamforge and stuff, and try to help you get the word out there.
Wonderful, thank you. Grab the link.
Did anyone have a poem that they wanted to share?
That's true. I forgot about. I said that and then I forgot here at the
Yeah.
end. Anybody have any poem? Everybody was so quiet. I couldn't imagine anybody actually speaking up and saying, "Here's my poem." But
I do actually have a poem.
well, go for it. We want to hear it. We want to hear it.
All right. Well, so I have two, and you can tell me which one you'd rather have. I have one that's a pre-post-apocalyptic poem, and one that is called Instructions for Flight.
What was the second one?
Instructions for Flight.
Ooh, I like the idea of instructions for flight.
Okay, there you go. Instructions for flight. Turn out your wings. Spin your naked arms into a blur. You are angling for the wide blue hoops that cut the sky into plates. It isn't weakness that grounds you. You lifted nearly an inch this time before you fell. Aim, my sweet, at the forked crescent where the plates overlap. Test your plucked wings. They will lift you from the globe again. Aim, aim, and make your secret corrections as you go.
Nice.
I like that.
Might as well go for the second one. Do the other one.
All right, well, this is not as cheery by far. So this is, like I said, it's pre-post-apocalyptic. It's called Anti-Delirium. I am steeped in it, my sorrow for all that will be lost. The satin smell of toast in the kitchen after breakfast, the unsynchronized slide of cricket song, a silk gray shadow over long grass and marigolds. These will be the good times, when we were young, when we knew peace as a solid thing with rounded edges, when the end was mythical infinite. The weak acid of a backwards nostalgia tart on my tongue, I gather my marigold memories, the soft brown pairings of a mundane afternoon, and I hide them away in the walls of this room.
Wow.
Very visual.
Yeah.
But yeah, not happy.
No.
Okay. Anybody else have any poetry?
Or any news to share? I see Kevin talking, but I don't hear anything.
There we go. There we go. I'm
Okay.
unmuted now. I have something that's not a limerick. I get these little pictures from time to time, and that's what I write. And this is, I don't have a title for it. Talk to me of ancient worlds, of wondrous days and nights of glowing enchantment. Show me the dreams and joys, small and graceful hints of lives that were and wishes that can never be again.
Nice.
See, I can write things other than
Yeah.
limericks.
Yeah.
Title of that one.
Karen says the title of that one needs to be Timestamp.
That could work.
I kind of liked your lack of a title for a title.
Okay.
The title could be, I don't have a title for this.
Yeah,
I
really.
actually have a poem.
Go for it.
Okay, the problem is the background for the poem takes longer than the poem itself, which is a haiku. Back around 2008, I had a serious diverticulitis attack, and they decided they had to take out part of my intestine. And they removed 13 inches of my descending sigmoid colon. The most expensive line copy edit that I've ever encountered. It was $70,000.
Whoa.
I went into the hospital with a colon and I came out with a semicolon. Now, herpling is something that cattle do and also people do, and it's a tendency, particularly if you have incisions on the front of your body, to become round-shouldered to reduce the tension, to reduce the pain. And that's called herpling. And as many of you know, I am a flounder. That is actually my avatar, as a flounder. And so here's the haiku. Purpled flounder, sliced, diced, and stapled, just to be repunctuated.
That's good. I see why you wanted to do the setup for that. That really works.
Yeah, it makes no sense otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
I actually gave a copy of that to my surgeon.
That is probably the only time that surgeon ever got a haiku in payment.
I doubt if he felt that it was $70,000 worth of haiku, though. Just saying.
Oh my. Okay. Just anybody have any other things to announce or discuss or poetry or?
I would like to make sure that everybody knows they are invited to come and contribute panel ideas next month at the Parsec meeting. I hope that we have a good turnout. I always, we always look for the input, and even if we don't use the panels this year, there's a chance that they'll get used next year. They don't get arbitrarily set aside. They are collected, and sometimes what's not appropriate this year, because of the people we have coming or whatever reason, is something that would really work next year. We look for everything from science fiction and fantasy topics to the futures of what's being written and how successfully it's being presented, and where is the world of science fiction publishing going, and things like that. So I'm hoping that everybody here will show up next month too. Always welcome.
We here.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thank you.
There we go.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Jana, you want to first stop the recording, and
Okay, I can do that.
we'll end the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Parsec today.